Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In this module, I am going to introduce the concept of water footprint. So just like carbon footprint that we have previously seen, water footprint is another assessment method for sustainability which is focused on water consumption. Now before I get into the method of water footprint calculation, it is important to again emphasize the importance of water from a sustainability standpoint. In the first week, when we talked about the ecosystem goods and services, we highlighted the role of water in maintaining the ecosystem goods and services. So from that point of view, water is extremely important. It is one of the basic necessities for human survival. But unfortunately, the availability of water and the quality of water is degrading quite rapidly in India as well as all over the world. This picture here, which is taken from this website known as Our Data in World, shows the availability of renewable fresh water for the last 50 years or so. And you can see that the global availability of fresh water per person on an annual basis has been steadily going down. And for India also you find a similar trend. Another point to note here is that for India, the per capita availability itself is significantly lower than the global average. This is mainly because of the very high population that we have. But the point of concern is that the availability is further going down with time. This could be first of all because of increased population. Secondly, also because the available freshwater resources are either shrinking or they are getting increasingly contaminated. So we are over exploiting the renewable water and therefore the availability is going down with time. And if it continues like this, the whole country will fall under water stressed, will be classified as water stressed country. This figure shows the water withdrawal per capita for different countries in the world. This is data for 2010, and as you can see, most of the Western countries, the developed countries, have fairly high water withdrawal per capita. The scale is given at the bottom. Similarly, some of the South African countries as well as the Middle Eastern countries have a fairly high water withdrawal per capita. Now what these two slides showed was that water availability is very important. It is the availability itself is going down, plus the water withdrawal in some of the countries is extremely high. And therefore we need to clearly understand the impact on water of a particular product, process, individual or any particular region. So it's not that water consumption has not been a point of concern in the past. There has been a lot of focus on water consumption in industries, for example, and there are concepts like zero liquid discharge which aim at reducing the water discharge, reducing the pollution, as well as ensuring that most of the water gets recycled within the industry. But if you look at most of the traditional water consumption assessment techniques, they primarily focus on direct consumption of water. So if you take an example of an industry, the focus mainly is on water that is used for processing or in boilers to generate steam or used for washing or dilution of the pollutants. So the calculations are mostly done for water that is consumed within the boundary of the industry. Even for a person, if you are trying to quantify the water consumption for a person, the focus has mainly been on direct water consumption, which is for things like drinking, cleaning, cooking and so on. But unfortunately, several studies have shown that this is not a very good approach because it gives you misleading information. Let us look at some of the issues with this limited approach. The main issue is that in many cases it has been shown that indirect water consumption can be significant. And a very good and relevant example is biofuels. If you look at a biofuel industry, the direct water consumption per liter of the liquid fuel that you are producing could be in the range of 5 to 10 liters. So in order to produce 1 liter of water, 1 liter of fuel, you consume about 5 to 10 liters of water. That is the direct water consumption. But the indirect consumption could be much higher, and this will be illustrated subsequently with the help of an example and a case study. So the indirect water consumption is often very important. Secondly, the source of the water consumed also needs to be properly analyzed. So whether it's direct rainwater or it's surface water or groundwater, that source also makes a difference on how sustainable the water consumption is. Third thing, these calculations often ignore the water required for managing the pollution. So there are these limitations in the traditional approach of quantifying the water consumption, and the method of water footprint calculation that we will see subsequently addresses these limitations. Before I get into the method of water footprint calculation, I want to give some illustrations, show you some examples of water footprint to motivate the need for doing a rigorous calculation. So I'm going to look at this website called as waterfootprint.org. So let's go to the website. So this is the website, waterfootprint.org. So this website is developed by a person who proposed this concept of water footprint, and subsequently this website and the people associated with this website have done a lot of research in this area. So you will find a lot of resources on this website, but I want to give a very brief introduction to the and give you some examples of water footprint. So if you go in the water footprint tab, there is a tab for product water footprint, and if you go to the product gallery, it gives you examples of some of the products for which water footprint calculations have already been done. So for example, Apple, this at the bottom it shows the total water footprint and also the unit. So it shows that for 1 kg of apple, the total water required is 822 liters per kg of apple. Now this obviously is not the water contained in apple, but it's the direct as well as indirect water. And you will see the distinction between the distribution of the total water between green, blue and gray. This concept we will see subsequently when we look at the method of water footprint calculation. So similarly, they have given a water footprint for some representative products here. Banana, for example, has a water footprint of 790 liters per kg of banana. Beef, it may come as a surprise, but beef has a water footprint of more than 15,000 liters per kg of beef. It is extremely high, and we will see the reasons for such a high water footprint. Beer, for example, has 72 liters of water footprint for 250 ml of beer. The example of biofuel that I mentioned, so per liter of bioethanol has a water footprint close to 3000 liters, and so on. So you can look at other products on this website and find out more about the water footprint. These are some representative numbers for a particular region. The website also provides information about personal water footprint. So it has a web-based tool which you can use to calculate your own water footprint. So similar to the ecological footprint calculator, which was also web-based, it asks you a series of questions, and based on that it gives you a water footprint number for yourself. It also provides some information about national water footprint. So for example, if you look at if you want to understand the water footprint for a particular country, you can visit this website and you can highlight that country. So for example, in India, it says that the direct the total water footprint per person is around 3000 liters per day. Now this is obviously not the water that we drink or the water that we use for cleaning and cooking. It's obviously much higher. Most of it is because of the indirect consumption. So similarly, you will find data for other countries. If you go to US, for example, which is one of the developed countries, the water consumption per capita is much higher than what is in India. So this the website gives you sort of a motivation to understand the water footprint calculation more carefully, and it illustrates the importance of considering the indirect water footprint, because some of these numbers are extremely high and much higher than what we intuitively feel. So this is the national water footprint comparison of different countries. The data is about 15 years old, but the purpose of this figure is to show you the extreme variation in per person water footprint across the world. So this figure shows the water footprint in meter cube per person per year, and you can see that for some of the developed countries like US, Canada and Western Europe, the water footprint is in the range of 2000 to 2500 meter cube per person per year, while for a country like India it is in the range of around 1000 to 1500. These numbers would have increased a little bit in the last 15 years, but I don't expect the trends to change significantly. To illustrate the point further, this figure shows the water footprint for electricity production, and the unit here is meter cube per terajoule of electricity. The point again is that the electricity production also leads to a lot of water consumption, and this is again not only the water that is required in the process. Let's say in the power plant, which is coal based, it is not only the water that is required for coal based power plant within the boundary, but it also includes water that is required outside the power plant, which is indirectly consumed because of the power plant. So just like the concept of carbon footprint, the water footprint also considers the indirect impacts, and that's why the numbers are very high. So this table shows additional details about different energy sources and the water footprint. So as you can imagine, the water footprint for hydropower, which is mentioned here, is extremely high, and that is expected because hydropower uses water to generate electricity. So it is expected that the water footprint will be significantly high. But there are several other sources also which have noticeably high water footprints. So given this background, I hope I have emphasized the importance of doing rigorous water footprint. So as I said at the beginning of this module, the method of water footprint calculation focuses on calculating the direct and indirect use of water. So this is similar to carbon footprint, and you can do water footprint calculation for a person, for a product, for a process, for a business, or for a nation as well. So the important learning outcome of this module are: first, that water withdrawal and water stress is continuously increasing globally, and some of the water withdrawal or water use numbers are much higher than we intuitively expect, and therefore water footprint calculation is important, and you can use water footprint to give the water consumption value for a product, person, business, or a nation. In this module, I will start explaining the method of doing water footprint calculations, and the first step for water footprint calculations is to understand different water flows in a particular region or a catchment area, and also to understand different types of waters. In the previous module, in the examples that were shown, there were these green and blue water numbers. So I want to explain the concept of green and blue water in this module. To briefly recap what was done in the previous module, water footprint focuses on direct and indirect use of water, and this calculation can be done for a person, for a product, for a process, for a business, or even for a country. So this is the scope of water footprint calculations. So in order to understand the method of water footprint calculations, we have to start by understanding the various flows of water in a catchment area. So let us first try to understand what happens to water in a particular catchment area. So let us say this is our catchment area that we are interested in. So just to briefly introduce what we mean by catchment area. Catchment area essentially represents a region where any water that is either falling on that in that region or is part of that region will eventually drain into a particular water body, such as a lake or a river. So catchment area could be fairly large, and all the streams or the small rivers will eventually converge and merge into a single river or a single water source. So that is a very simplified definition of a catchment area. So let us assume that this region encompassed by this black line is a catchment area. The main source of water for any catchment area is rainfall. So I will represent that here by these red lines. So that is also known as precipitation. So more technical term for that is precipitation, or which we commonly call as rainfall. Now this rainfall will obviously fall on various regions in the catchment area. So let us try to understand what happens to this rainfall. So you will have a piece of land, and this obviously will be a contiguous region, but I am isolating it for the sake of illustration. So let us say this is a particular piece of land. Now this piece of land will have certain vegetation. It could be grass, it could be forest, or it could also be soil. So there could be some part of this land which is not which doesn't have any vegetation, and it's just soil. So this region will have soil and vegetation. So what happens to the water that falls on this land? So the first thing is soils have certain water absorption capability. This capacity or this water absorption capacity differs from soil type. So there are certain soils which absorb a lot of water. There are certain other types of soil which do not absorb any water. But some of the water or precipitation that is falling on this land will be absorbed by soil, and the soil moisture content will go up. Similarly, some precipitation that falls on this piece of land will also be taken up by the vegetation. So the water will be staying on the leaves, for example, of these trees or agricultural any agricultural activity that is going on, crops for example, and or even grass. So some water will stay on that vegetation, but obviously this capacity is fairly limited. So a significant portion of this water will eventually run off. So from this piece of land, it will run off. Now this is known as the runoff at field level. So this is the part of water of the rainfall or precipitation that has not been taken up by soil or vegetation and which is running off from that piece of land. Now this will obviously happen to different pieces of land which I am drawing here without the additional details, and all the water that is running off from these different fields will eventually get into a particular surface water, or it will actually percolate underground. So this water that is running off has two different sources. One is let me just draw it here. So I'll just represent this different destination of water by delineating it here like this. So I can call it as surface and groundwater. So this is so some of the water that runs off at field level will contribute to the surface water. The examples of surface water bodies are lakes and rivers, and some water will also percolate through the soil to the underground aquifers. So this is the water that is stored underground. So when we dig up a well, the water that comes out is this water in the underground aquifer, and that is known as the groundwater. So some water will contribute towards surface and groundwater, but again, not all the water that is running off at field level eventually becomes part of surface or groundwater in the catchment, because the ability of a particular water body to take up water is limited. Also, the groundwater recharge is also limited. So again, some of the water will eventually run off out of this catchment area. So this particular water that is finally going out of the catchment area is known as runoff from catchment. So this is water that is going somewhere else, and a typical example of this is river. So river will actually cross multiple catchment areas. So it will accumulate water from a particular catchment area. Some of this water will eventually become part of the groundwater, but some water will also eventually pass on to the subsequent or downstream catchment area. So this is what happens broadly to rainfall that falls on a particular piece of land. Now I have shown the same thing here in a more organized way. So you have precipitation or rainfall that comes to a particular catchment area. You have first it is taken up by soil and vegetation, then it runs off at field level and it can become part of surface or groundwater, and whatever is not becoming part of surface or groundwater in that catchment area is finally going out of the catchment area. So this concept is important to understand the different types of waters. So let us try to understand how this relates to the different types of water. So based on the description that I just gave, the definition of green water is precipitation on land that does not run off or recharge the aquifer, groundwater, but is stored in the soil or temporarily stays on top of the soil or vegetation. So this was the first part of the destination of water that I discussed, or water flows that I discussed in the previous on the previous screen. While blue water is fresh water or groundwater, in other words, the water in freshwater lakes, rivers or aquifers. So going back to the drawing that we just drew on the previous slide. So this is the first portion, which is the soil and vegetation. So whatever water that is stored here is known as green water, and whatever water is part of this particular category, which is surface and groundwater, is known as the blue water. So this concept will become important later when we look at the different types of water footprints. So the important learning outcomes of this module are, first of all, I discussed the fate of water that we receive from precipitation, and I talked about different ways it can go, different compartments it can become part of. And based on that, we defined green water, which is rainwater that is stored in soil or on vegetation, and blue water represents surface or groundwater. Thank you.